Some mysteries aren't doors to the supernatural, they're windows we haven't cleaned yet. Today we'll scrub a few panes and see how ordinary physics, history, and human attention explain legends we love, because wonder grows when explanations land. The core idea is simple. When many people, storms, or stories converge, odd things happen more often, which meant patterns can look eerie even when the math and mechanics are familiar. We'll separate story from evidence, then keep the parts that still sparkle. Begin with the triangle that launched 1,000 specials. The so-called Bermuda Triangle stretches between Miami, Bermuda, and San Juan, covering hundreds of thousands of square miles of busy ocean. It feels haunted because planes and ships have vanished there, which meant headlines could stack into a myth. But traffic explains much of the drama. Those waters sit on the doorstep of the United States and the Caribbean, with heavy routes since World War II and the jet age, therefore more vessels mean more incidents in raw counts. Compare incident rates to similarly busy corridors in the North Atlantic, and you see no unusual spike. Weather and geography add risk without mystery. Fast-building storms, squalls, and the powerful Gulf Stream can turn small errors into big emergencies, which meant navigation mishaps escalate quickly. Shallow banks and reefs near the Bahamas punish mistakes that deeper seas forgive. Reporting bias does the rest. A mid-1970s bestseller stitched mishaps into a single story, therefore later accidents within the triangle drew more coverage than similar events elsewhere. What looks like a cursed map is often a crowded map with storm lanes and selective memory. That doesn't mean every case is solved. A few disappearances still lack complete records or wreckage, and we should label that uncertainty and move on. The pattern as a whole, however, fits normal risk where weather, workload, and error overlap. Next, shift from sea to desert, where lines etched into Earth survive 2 millennia. The Nazca Lines lie on Peru's south coast, likely made between about 200 BCE and 600 CE. They depict animals, plants, and vast geometric forms, some measuring hundreds of meters across. The technique is straightforward once you know the canvas. A desert pavement of dark, oxidized stones covers lighter subsoil, which meant scraping away a shallow strip reveals a bright line visible from surrounding hills. No quarrying, no cement, just careful removal and the desert's dryness to preserve it. Planning large figures required simple tools, not aircraft. You can set grids with stakes and cords, extend sightlines between markers, and scale designs from small sketches. Therefore, lines stay straight and curves stay smooth over distance. Archaeologists have found post holes and alignment points that match this method. Why choose those shapes and scales remains debated. Some lines align with solstices and water sources. Others trace processional routes or social symbols, which meant art, ritual, and landscape management likely overlapped. We don't need a runway for visitors from the stars when a patient community and a bright desert suffice. Now to a warrior image that refuses to retire, horned Viking helmets. The story says fierce Norse raiders strapped antlers to iron and charged ashore, which meant children's costumes and stadium mascots follow suit. Evidence says otherwise. Archaeologists have uncovered very few complete Viking Age helmets, and the famous finds, like a 10th century example from Norway, lack horns. Therefore, practical gear favored protection over decoration. Horns catch blows, tangle in rigging, and add weight. So where did the horns come from? 19th century artists and costumers romanticized the past, and a widely staged opera cycle in 1876 cemented the look, which meant illustration, theater, and national myth filled gaps left by scarce artifacts. There are horned helmets in Europe, but most belong to ritual contexts centuries before the Vikings. The legend persists because it reads instantly on a page. A horned silhouette telegraphs ancient warrior at a glance. Therefore, it keeps winning poster space even as museums shrug. Again, story outpaces evidence until we compare them side by side. Finally, let's visit a dry lake bed that moves rocks when nobody's looking. On Racetrack Playa in Death Valley, stones slide across the flat clay and leave long tracks, which meant for decades hikers arrived to find trails without witnesses. The explanation hides in rare winter weather. A thin layer of water pools after rain. A wafer of ice freezes a few millimeters thick overnight, and light winds push panels of ice against the rocks. Therefore, stones glide a few centimeters per second for minutes at a time. When the ice melts and the playa dries, the tracks remain like signatures. Researchers finally caught the motion with instruments and patient cameras in the early 2010s. Not every rock moves every year because conditions must align just right, which meant mystery lived longer than usual, while nature waited for the right cold morning. No magnets, no pranksters, just ice, wind, and a smooth floor. Notice the theme across sea, desert, museum, and playa. Crowded routes inflate raw accident counts. Bright subsoil makes giant drawings practical, art, and nationalism color memory. And thin ice multiplies a gentle breeze. Therefore, everyday forces weave extraordinary scenes. When we see the mechanics, the wonder deepens instead of dying. Ready for a closing riddle that asks you to reconstruct cause from effect? A sealed room shows water on the floor and shards of glass. A goldfish lies nearby. Nothing else looks disturbed. The door was locked from the inside, which meant you must work with the pieces you have. What happened? Step by careful step. Post a short explanation that starts with the last moment and works backward, because reversing the sequence clarifies what must be true. We'll reveal it and highlight the best takes in the next Mind Maze stream. Here's the distilled takeaway. Beloved mysteries rarely vanish under explanation. They sharpen because ordinary forces, traffic, weather, tools, culture, and ice, create extraordinary scenes once you add time and attention. If this episode made puzzles feel richer, subscribe for more mind-stretching journeys each week.